What are some examples here and the impact it's having?
That's right, Tom. Look, in the context of upcoming senior level dialogues between Australian and US foreign ministers, we need to pay attention to really three things. One is responding to the pandemic itself and building that health and developmental resilience in the region. That's what the region really needs. But second, as you mentioned in the lead here, we also need to be very sensitive to the way that China is using both cyber and disinformation techniques, as well as geopolitical techniques to advance its interests, and we need to be cautious about that. So to your question about disinformation, we saw going back about 6 weeks now when the foreign minister announced Australia's lead on an international and independent inquiry into COVID-19's origins, we saw China really turn on the screws with regards to its propaganda made by the Chinese ambassador here in Australia, Chang Jingye, but also advanced by foreign ministry spokespeople, both in China and in other consulates around the country. And this was expanded upon and really amplified by Chinese online English language media, as well as Chinese online social media. And the key message was this: Australia, in trying to call for such an inquiry, was acting at the behest of Washington, and therefore Australia should not be taken seriously. That is a false narrative. It's those sorts of things that we need to, both independently and as an alliance, be really careful about and find ways to counteract.
And when we're talking about counteracting, I mean, you're talking about comments made by Chinese officials and obviously them eventually getting through to people, whether it be citizens or otherwise, people higher up in the Indo-Pacific region. For most people, the defence of the Chinese Communist Party to do with, oh, well, this might have been a plant from the US military. I mean, at a cursory glance, it just didn't seem at all plausible. Is that sort of thing pretty easy to push back against, or is it hard to imagine just the extent to which the disinformation campaign is run?
That's a great question. There are two aspects to it. You're absolutely right. When it comes to the really incredible things that we have heard from Beijing, but also from Moscow at different times during this pandemic, that the Wuhan virus was somehow created by and unleashed on China by the US Army, that doesn't carry any weight, certainly amongst Western media consumers. I would hazard a guess it doesn't carry much weight amongst Chinese media consumers either. That is dismissed as being a statement to be given no validity. But when it comes to the comments that I mentioned around Australia being accused of only calling for a virus to politicize the issue, to blame China because Washington wanted us to do this and we're acting as a non-independent ally, that's a little bit harder to approach. It's no secret that there is concern in Australia that at times the Australian government makes decisions that are too closely aligned with Washington. There are views in Australia that think we ought to not be doing that. And so what Chinese disinformation does, and any effective disinformation campaign does, is it zeroes in on a point of weakness or division within a society, such as disagreements around undertaking foreign policy decisions that are in step with US interests, and it magnifies those to make them an issue to divide us and prevent us from operating in ways that we would otherwise choose to do. That's what we need to counteract, and that's a lot harder. One way to do that is by always making sure that when we speak about the alliance and when we speak about Australian policy, that on both sides of the Pacific, cabinet members are being very clear about who is calling for what, when and how.
Yeah, I guess it sort of goes to, like any good PR campaign, base it on something that has some truth in it and hope it grows from there. You've mentioned trying to stop Chinese encroachment on Southeast Asian countries, and doing that will need a strengthening of the US alliance. Presumably that project, the alliance aspect, is very different depending on who is in the White House beyond this year's election.
Yeah, look, that's absolutely right. And that's where I come to the third point, really, that's crucial for us in preparing for this year's AUSMIN. We need to be laying down markers for this administration, as well as the potential Biden administration, for how Australia, independently and as a regional country here in Asia, wants to see US Indo-Pacific strategy unfold over the coming months and into a new administration. Because it's, again, no secret to say that there has been much that this administration has done with regards to its Asia policy that has not been in our interests. And I would argue that has it also been in US regional interests, which we would not like to see a continuation of. So this OSMIN offers an opportunity for us to say, we agree and we want to work with the United States and with regional partners in strengthening Southeast Asian countries' response to, let's say, Chinese territorial incursions or maritime incursions in the South China Sea. And we have ideas and ways how we can do that and strengthen that together in partnership with the region. But at the same time, a reflexively, stridently anti-China policy that comes out in ways that turn off countries like Singapore or turn off countries like Malaysia because it's too zero sum is not in our interest. We need to speak about our regional objectives in different ways. This OSMIN provides an opportunity, as with the ongoing Australia-US coordination mechanisms on Indo-Pacific strategy, to make these points, and I think they're crucially important right now.
Yeah, and balancing all that up against what's happening with that tension with China and how they might react. But
exactly.
Fascinating insights nonetheless. Ashley Townshend, thanks for your time.